Aye, kuwe kuamadue.
Aye, kuwe kuamadue.
Aye, kuwe kuamadue.
Aye, kuwe kuamadue.
Could you state your name, please?
My name is Quinton Sankofa.
Quinton Sankofa. Well, thank you so much, and we are going to get started. So the first question is, where did you grow up?
Grew up in Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay. What was that like when you were growing up? Did you live there for your whole life? Well, not obviously your whole life, but your adult life, and what was that?
Yeah, I left Cleveland at 18
Okay.
when I went to Michigan State University for undergrad. But yeah, I mean, that was my home. That's where I was born and raised. You know, that's where I came of age. But yeah, at 18, I was out. I haven't been living there since.
Okay. What was it like in the community that you grew up in?
Cleveland is a very interesting place. You know, my thoughts about it now, looking back on it, are different than when I lived there, right? Like growing up, I didn't have a sense of the world and how things worked. So I never really understood a lot of things growing up until I got older and began to do research and understand why things were the way they were. But for me personally, I was a part of a really big family. My grandma and my grandfather on my mom's side had 13 children.
Oh, wow.
My mom being one of them. They were all from Tennessee. She was born in Nashville, and then they moved up here. And for me growing up, you know, it was really all about family. You know, that's who I played with. You know, I had like 50 first cousins, all of the ones that were in, you know, a 5-year age group. You know, it's probably 20 of us, and we're like brothers and sisters. Mm-hmm. So a lot of time I was at grandma's house or at an auntie's house, or cousins would be at my house. So, you know, I had like some friends outside of my family, but not many. So it was really about my family. So for me, you know, growing up in Cleveland was really about that. It was a lot about family, but we were very poor too, and so some of those things really stick out to me. Just not having certain things growing up. You know, being food insecure. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that stuck with me from growing up in Cleveland is the poverty and the segregation. It's a very, very segregated city. On paper, it looks diverse in numbers. When I was growing up, it was like almost 50% black, 50% white.
Wow.
However, literally 99% of all the black people live on the east side. And then the west side is a little mixed, but overwhelmingly white. So really growing up in Cleveland was really about only being able to like kind of move about freely in a certain area of the city. And then when we go to other places in the suburbs or other parts that were outside of the hood, you know, that's where we get racial profiled. That's where, you know, people would, you know, be mean to us, you know, and basically make us know that we weren't really welcome on that side of town.
Wow.
So a lot of confusing things growing up.
I can imagine. And just experiencing that, what was it like when you were going to school? Was that the segregation still in play in terms of, you know, the other people that were in your school in terms of fighting? Was that something, or was it, you know, different?
Well, yeah, you know, for most of the schools on the east side, they're all black, right? But I did have an experience in, what was it, 5th grade, 6th grade? Yeah, about 6th grade, I got into a gifted and talented program. And their idea it was 2 schools in Cleveland that were, quote unquote, for gifted and talented students. And one was Whitney Young, and the other one was Wilbur Wright Middle School. Okay. And both of them was far away from where I lived. But a group of, you know, kids on the east side, we got bused. It was like an hour bus ride to the west side. And that's where I went to middle school in Wilbur Wright. And the racial dynamics were terrible. Because you had a group of like young, you know, middle school black kids coming from the east side, where we don't interact with white people at all. You know, the only white people we ever see are teachers and police. That's all. And so going over to the west side, It was just very interesting because this school had a large Latino population too, a large Mexican American population, and some white students as well. But we were this group of supposedly just very intelligent black kids from the hood in the school with these other races. But we were segregated in the school. Like we went to our own classes, and they called us the Gifted and Talented program, and they said the other kids were in regular education. So it was just a very weird dynamic. You know, we were going to school with these other kids, but they weren't in our classes, and we weren't in their classes. So it set up this really interesting racial beef at the school, because not only are we black kids from the east side, but in the school we're the smartest kids according to, you know, the test or whatever, right? So they really didn't like that. You know what I'm saying? Like they were like, who are these kids coming from the east side and they're all ghetto, right? But then we're getting treated special because we're so-called gifted and talented. So we actually had a lot of fights across race. It was my first encounter with, I guess, you know, I don't know if I call it racial riots, you know what I'm saying? But we definitely had race fights in middle school. And yeah, it was weird. It was weird.
Wow. What would you say influenced you the most, or who maybe influenced you the most as a child?
My mother, hands down. She's the reason I am who I am to this day. One of the things that I think is important is the way that she parented me. My father left when I was about 2, and my mom was like, "Look, from what I understand, she had an opportunity to leave with him. He moved out of the city and moved to Washington D.C. And she just didn't want to go. She didn't want to leave her family, and he wanted to move on and do different things with his life. So she told him, "You can go ahead, and she'll take care of me by herself," and she did. We struggled some because of that, no doubt. But the way that she parented me, being very truthful and honest with me about things, and she also did not hit me. She did not allow other people to whoop me or spank me or hit me. Her style of discipline was all about communication and expectations and love. And so she taught me a lot of things early about what was okay for adults to do to you and what wasn't. And I feel like they gave me a lot of bodily autonomy. Yeah, so I think for me, she's definitely the most influential person.
Wow, that's amazing. Do you have siblings?
I do.
Okay.
I have, you know how it is, right, for black folks, right? Like, I got a lot of siblings, right? And some are quote unquote blood siblings, some are cousins that are like siblings. But in terms of my, you know, genetic connection, I have a sister and I have a brother. And my sister unfortunately passed when she was 45 a few years ago. And I have a brother who's younger than me who lives in the D.C. area.
Well, condolences on your sister.
Thank you.
Yeah, but that sounds, just even you talking about how your mother raised you and the things that she instilled, and one things you just mentioning about having autonomy over your body and understanding the boundaries, dealing with adults and having that level of communication, I think is that says a lot, you know, as a parenting style, and just, you know, kind of going from that. So it's just really interesting to hear that. And I'm curious, as you were speaking as well about the segregation, and just as you were growing up, seeing kind of this stark difference, not just from racially, but also in kind of the economic class, and mentioning, you know, just you know, being poor when you're growing up. How did that frame, I guess, your idea about being black in America? Like, what does being black mean to you?
I mean, it's something that is always changing in my psyche and how I view things. If you would have asked me this growing up in Cleveland, I would have a very different answer. But for me, at this point in my life, being black in America, it means a lot. It's a, what do you call it? I don't want to say it's an irony, but there's something that's beautiful about it and wonderful about it, and there's some things that are terrible about it. You know, this identity around black is not something that we necessarily created ourselves, but we're made into by oppressive forces, right? So in the identity of being black in America, we do lose some of our actual, cultural connections, right? Like our lineages and our heritage. We don't have those records. We don't have those intergenerational ties, right? That say, hey, I'm Yoruba, or I'm Tikar, or I'm Mende, or I'm Mandinka, or a whole number of things, right? I'm Igbo, right? We don't have those connections directly. And so Black is something that seeks to bring us together and remind us that we are having a common experience, which is a beautiful thing to get us through the struggle. But also in Black, we do lose some of those, historical ties and connections, specifically the land as well, right? There's no place called Black land, right? So taking on an identity of being Black is like, that's cool, but where does that situate me historically and geographically beyond our struggle here, right? Before we got here, we weren't Black, right? We weren't on slave ships like, hey, this is a Black person, that's a Black person. We all were different ethnicities and had different languages, and that's how people identified. Is much more based on, their customs and practices, their languages. But our identity now as Black is more about our struggle, and our resistance. So at the same time, it's beautiful, but it's also hard.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And just around that, I'm curious. You mentioned earlier, like you left at 18 from Cleveland, and did you come out west after that, or? You went to school, you remember,
Yeah.
and then after that, did you move west, or?
I'll give you the journey.
Okay.
So, and does that sound cool in there? I just want to be cool. Because he can chill. He can, yeah.
That's good. Well, these answers, man.
Thanks, man. This is real cool to sit and chat with you like this.
Yeah, yeah. I always enjoy it.
Got me thinking about stuff.
Yeah, no, it's you a lot to uncover, and just even when we were sharing earlier and just talking about the differences when you grow up, and I was even going to touch on just the poverty side, and just like, when did you realize that you didn't have whatever else versus someone else? It's always, people always have different answers for that. It could be when they're 5, it could have been when they're 10. Sometimes it wasn't into their adults because that's what everyone else had around them, so it didn't feel like that. So yeah, but it's definitely a lot.
Okay, cool.
Okay, here we go. All right.
You asked about the journey.
Yes, asking about
I'll give it to you.
Okay.
So I'm gonna tell you this. This is, I think, funny when I look back on it. So growing up, I did well in school. It came easy to me. I was able to, get good grades or whatever. And as I grew older, that became less cool, right? Like, as I got into puberty and stuff, now it's all about attraction and like romance and like, wow, like how can I get with the girls, And so school became less important to me because it didn't seem to be important to the girls. You know what I'm saying? What seemed to be important was being tough. And I was like, okay, well, I am tough too. So let's do that. Let's lean into that. So I went through a whole little phase in middle school where I actually ended up failing. I failed the 8th grade. It's so silly. Being young and dumb, I thought I had some things figured out, right? I was like, there's this thing called the Ohio State Proficiency Test. I'm sure there's like state equivalents here, but when I was growing up, this was the test that you had to pass before you left high school, no matter what. Like you could get all your grades and all your credits, but if you didn't pass this proficiency test, then that said you weren't ready for graduation. And so for me, I remember, we would take the prep test in middle school because it's a test that you get to take, I think, in your 8th grade year, and you have every year there to pass it until you graduate, right? And so I remember them making a big deal about it in school and everything like this, and I was not doing well in school at all. Not because I wasn't intelligent, but I just was going through some things and was like, whatever, I was just checking out. And I had this plan in my mind, right? I was like, well, if I pass the proficiency test, then clearly I'm ready to go on to the next grade. Like whatever they're teaching me in this class, whatever. As long as I pass this proficiency test, they'll know I'm ready for the next level, right? So I messed around that whole year. I didn't go to class. I was cutting. I was doing all types of wild stuff, me and some of my friends. And I ended up getting like for the whole year, I had like 22 Fs for the whole year.
Okay.
22 Fs. This is unheard of for me. I was a straight A student before that. This is my 8th grade year. And, you know, in my mind, I thought, it's all right. What I'm going to do is, I had a plan, right? My plan was I was going to go to summer school. I was going to make it up. And I knew that I was going to pass the proficiency test because we had been doing it. I was like, this is kind of easy. So that's exactly what happened. We took the proficiency test in the 8th grade. I passed all 5 parts. Some other kids didn't, you know, who was going to school regularly. So my teachers were a little baffled. Like, hold on, like, you're not coming to school. You got all these Fs, but like, how did you pass this test, right? I was like, yeah, whatever, you know, I passed the test. They're going to let me go to the next grade. And they was like, nah, we're not. And I was like, oh, shit. Like, I failed? And it was like, yeah, you failed. You had 22 Fs. I was like, oh, shit. Like, I didn't think this was going to happen. I was like, but it's okay. I got a plan. I'm going to just go to summer school, right? So I got home. I told my mom this. I was like, you know, it's like, I failed, blah, blah, blah. I was like, it's okay, Ma, don't worry. I'm going to go to summer school. I'm going to make it up. I passed all the proficiency tests. It's okay, right? And she was like, you ain't going to summer school? I was like, what do you mean I'm not going to summer school? I was like, Mom, chill. It's free. I thought, you know, she was like, no, I ain't about to pay for that. Like, you messed up. I ain't paying for it. I was like, no, it's cool. It's free. I already looked into it. She was like, I don't care if it's free. Like, that's not the point. You messed around and you didn't take your schoolwork seriously and you let it get to this point and you haven't been communicating with me. You know, like I was probably hiding my report cards from her and all of this, right? And she was like, no, you're not going. And I was like, what? Like, oh shit. That's when it all hit me. I was like, damn, like I'm about to be like in the 8th grade again. Like I'm hella old. I should be in 9th grade. You know what I'm saying? I'm like trying to go to high school. Like I'm about to be in 8th grade again. Oh, so that just tore my world up.
Wow.
So that was a kick in my ass that I needed. And so I got kicked out of the gifted and talented program. They was like, no, you can't come back here, bro. Like you failed out. So I went to the school that was in my neighborhood, which was a very, very tough, rough school, Patrick Henry Middle School, for those that know it. And that was an experience, you know. But I got there, and like I was saying, I was already, you know, I was ready academically. I just needed to get my mind, my social order together. So I got to that school and I just focused. And I was like, all right, I can't fuck around. Like, I really got to get out this situation because, like, all my friends are in fucking high school now and I'm over here in middle school. I felt so ashamed and embarrassed. I was like, this is not cool. So basically, I worked and the teachers was like, in the first quarter, they was like, what are you doing here? Because, you know, I'm getting straight A's. They was like, hold on. This don't make no sense. And so I had the good opportunity to talk with the principal of the school. Because the teachers were like, man, this doesn't make sense. Like 2 quarters went by, I had straight A's. And it was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, why are you here? So I talked to the principal, and he was a black guy named Mr. Arnold. And we had a real conversation, and I was telling him what was going on with me and why. He was like, what happened? I was just like letting him know I just was struggling with who I am and who I want to be, and I started doing the wrong things. So long story short, he told me that he can make some calls. So he put in a couple of calls and to some local high schools and was like, hey, I got a kid who's ready. He passed the proficiency test, right? So that did help me in the long run. It's like he's already passed the proficiency test. He's getting straight A's. He just needs another opportunity. So he asked me if I wanted to go to Collinwood High School, and I didn't, actually. That was like the rival school in my neighborhood. But I didn't want to take no chances. He was like, the dude from Collinwood says he got a spot for you in his freshman class. You want to go? I was like, yeah. He was like, I could call Glenville. That was my neighborhood school that I really wanted to go to, but I was not trying to risk it. I was like, nah, bro. Like, I'm going to take that. Whatever you got, I'm taking it. So anyway, I got promoted halfway through the year, and so I started doing 9th grade, right? And so I was always behind, like half a year in my credit. So I had to do night school and summer school sometimes and to get fully caught up, right? So I ended up doing all of that, and I get to my senior year. I'm back on track. Academics are good. I'm ready to move on. There's a side note in this. My mom died in this transition, by the way. My 8th grade year, as I was actually, after I transferred to Collinwood, that summer from 9th grade to 10th grade, my mom dies. That's a whole nother story. But anyway, I get to senior year, right? And I'm ready to go. I don't have any concept about college. I don't understand. I just knew I had good grades. There was not too many people that went to college around me. I had one cousin who went, and he was kind of like my role model in that way. I was like, okay, he went to college, and everybody was always like bigging him up, and he looked happy. You know, he was doing different stuff. He was playing football in college. He was hecka smart and hecka athletic. He went to Carnegie Mellon, and he was like an engineer student and a football player. So I was kind of like, I want to be like my cousin. But I didn't know how college worked. You know, I thought you get recruited, everybody, not just athletes. So I was waiting for some college to recruit me because they thought like, hey, this kid's getting good grades. He passed the proficiency test, right? Like that was always a thing to me. Like he did it early, right? So I thought they was like tracking this stuff and was gonna recruit me. One day I got a postcard in the mail from Michigan State University, and it was for their engineering department. They basically had like a representative that was going to be in Cleveland and was inviting students to come down and hear about the program and do on-site application. So I thought this was my chance. I thought, oh, they're recruiting me. They want me to come to their school. This is what it is, right? Like I had this whole idea in my head. And so my uncle, who I was living with at the time, he took me downtown to I think it was at the Marriott, and you know, I went and listened to their presentation. I was like, yeah, they're trying to sign me. Like I had this whole narrative in my head, like this is my opportunity. So I did the little on-site admissions thing and application. They waived the fee, and this was like early in my senior year. And I don't know, maybe like a month later, they sent me an acceptance letter.
Wow.
So I was like, I'm going to Michigan State. You know, it was that simple. I didn't apply to other schools, you know, like I was just like, okay, they want me, I'm gonna go here. I didn't know anything else, you know. I didn't find out later that was not a recruitment. That was not for those scholarships. That was just like an information session. So
wow.
I had no idea about any of this. So that's kind of how I got out of Cleveland and Ohio. And that exposed me to Michigan and a shitload of debt by being an out-of-state student. Lesson learned. But that's how I came out of Cleveland.
Okay. And
You got your cell phone on? Let me take your cell phone and your Apple Watch.
Yes.
That's Apple Watch, right?
Fitbit.
Fitbit, okay. Just a little feedback. I'm gonna put it right. I'm gonna put it right over here.
oh, over there.
Is your stuff right here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna put it right here. See,
Perfect.
good.
Thank you.
That's fine.
Okay. Got it. I'm trying not to kick it. It's been. Yeah,
All
we're
right.
good to go. So you got out and moved Michigan, at least while you were in school and doing that. What was the experience like for you in college once you got there and just started doing that?
College was great. Despite the racial dynamics on campus, you know, it's a large Big Ten university. You know, we got 60,000 kids there, and maybe 3% are black. And of that 3%, you know, for black males, a lot of us are playing sports, right? So, you know, it's just a terrible racial dynamic in that way, right? But at the same time, it's the safest place that I've ever been, right? So like, there's nothing happening there that's like too out of control. There's a lot of things that are happening actually that just don't get reported. But just in terms of like housing, right? Like I had a stable place to be. I had food every day. If I went to my classes, the instructors were going to be there. If I went to the bookstore, the books were going to be there. Like in terms of stability, it was one of the most stable places and the most beautiful places that I had ever lived. It's a very nice campus. So for me, it was just like just an eye-opening, you know? Like I had never been around white people before like that. I didn't have a single white friend growing up. I didn't have one in college either. But I at least got to be around white folks and kind of like make relationships and see folks. And it was very interesting in that way. It was real segregated still too, you know, like there were a couple dorms on campus that were pretty much the black dorms. It was the Brody complex and it was the Hubbard complex. And we were sprinkled around campus, you know, in other areas, but these are like on the two opposite ends of campus, which is so weird. So there's beef on campus, right, between the black kids in Brody and the black kids at Hubbard. Not a real like violent beef, but like a, you know, rivalry, you know. So it was just interesting. It was just interesting being there. But yeah, I met who is now my wife. Met longtime best friends there. I got socially active and got involved in organizations, doing student organizing. And for me, after a while being at Michigan State, I got into urban and regional planning. And that is when I began to understand why my experience was the way it was growing up in Cleveland. Like, before I got there, I had all these questions that were unanswered about why does the east side of Cleveland look like it does? Why are things so run down? Why is there so much poverty, but the west side is not like that? It's the same city, but all the black people live over here, all the white people live over there. Our neighborhood is just run down, trash everywhere, abandoned buildings. I didn't understand. How could this be the same city? And once I got to college, I got answers to that. The answers people were giving me around me were just not adding up to me. People were saying stuff like, oh, well, black people don't want anything more than this. I didn't believe that. I knew I wanted more than this. And all the people around me seemed to want nice things and take care of things. That was another thing. Oh, black people don't take care of stuff. That didn't make sense to me. All of our family members working hard and taking care of the little things they got. I didn't get it. And then it was like, hey, it's always been this way. And I was like, oh man, that doesn't make sense to me either. I'm like, I don't feel like this is, I didn't know, but I just didn't feel it. Like, this couldn't have been the way it's always been. So, nobody really gave me no real answers about like, yo, the ghetto was created. Like, this was not a accident. This was not some plan that black people had to live this way. So once I got to studying urban and regional planning, I got to look at the policies. I got to look at the history of residential segregation. Mm-hmm. I got to look at zoning ordinances. Just examining the firsthand documents really opened my eyes. It's like, okay, I can see this was a concerted effort by the government and the private industries to create ghettos that I lived in. So once I got that, I said, okay, I can unpack this and I can work with folks to change this.
Interesting, yeah. And just around that, I think it speaks so much, as you were saying, about your experience growing up, and you can see the overlap and how that impacts so many other people that you grew up with, and then across the country, just seeing how much the roles of redlining and racial steering and all those things brought us to a lot of the places that black folks live now throughout, everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, after you started learning this and getting involved with this, was that part of the reason that you decided to move out west, or what fostered that decision?
So when I became a planner, when I decided to study planning, I was first an engineering student when I got to Michigan State. And in my junior year, I decided to switch. What happened for me, I went to Detroit. I was a part of this student organization called the Multiracial Unity Living Experience. Mm-hmm. Essentially, we were a multiracial group trying to bring together, black and white and other students on campus to talk about racism, sexism, gender, all kinds of topics, all critical conversations to bring about unity amongst the different folks that were on campus. And as a part of that, we would take this group of students to Detroit to meet Grace Lee Boggs and see the work of the Boggs Center. And that was my first time seeing people really like organize to work in their neighborhood to bring about change. So for me, that's what got me to switch my major. I was like, oh, this is what I'm passionate about. This is what I want to do. So that got me into that whole field, and a field of study undergrad. And I just had I had a professor. Her name is June Manning Thomas. I took her Introduction to Urban and Regional Planning, and this is what really opened my eyes. Like, going to meet Grace put the question like, hey, what is this and how can I do this? One of the directors of the program said, you should check out urban planning as a major. So I did. I took June's class, and it just blew my mind. And then from there, I just got deep into the field. Once I'm getting ready to graduate, an opportunity comes around. There's a school called Clark University, in Massachusetts, not Clark, Atlanta. This is in Massachusetts. It's a small private liberal arts college. They have a planning program there, and apparently they were looking to diversify their student body. They reached out to people like June Thomas and said, hey, we have fellowships available for Black and Latino students to come and do master's work at our program. So she recommended me for that program, and I went. I had to go through the application process and everything, but ultimately I got accepted, and then they provided me a full fellowship for 2 years to come study at Clark University. So that's when I left. I left Michigan State. I graduated. My girlfriend or fiance at the time, we both moved to Massachusetts, and she started working there, and I started going to graduate school. And then I graduated from there, and that was a whole thing. Massachusetts is a different racist kind of place. I remember the biggest thing, when I drove over there, I remember getting on the 90 Turnpike, and once you hit Massachusetts, they have pilgrim hats on the freeway signs. Once you get into Massachusetts, they're proud of this shit. I was just like, wow. For me, I was like, oh, wow. It felt like being in the South. You know what I'm saying? To me, you may as well replace that pilgrim hat with a Confederate flag. That's how I felt. So driving in, I was just like, wow, what is this place? They're really happy about this pilgrim shit? Oh, where am I? And once I got there, I was like, oh, okay, I see I see this brand of racism here. It's a little different, but it's definitely there. So we had a whole experience around race and things like that. We had some student organizing we did there too, because the faculty was just off the chain. It was they didn't have a Black person on the faculty. And so a lot of things happened there. But ultimately, after 2 years, I got my degree, and my fiance, we actually got married, so now this is my wife. And she definitely didn't want to stay in Massachusetts. I didn't. We didn't want to go back to the Midwest because the economy was very bad at the time, and she struggled already trying to get a job there before we left, a meaningful job. So we was like, well, what do we do? Where do we go? So we thought about going to the South, because a lot of us was going to the South. Right, you know what I'm saying? We thought about going maybe to North Carolina, maybe Atlanta, maybe Houston, but ultimately, some of the people that I met in my program, they were from the Bay Area or from, California. One of them was from Sacramento. And she was just like, hey, Q, I know you're trying to figure out what you want to do, where you want to go. She was like, I really think you should consider Oakland. She's like, for what you're about and how you see the world and what you want to do with your life, Oakland is probably a good place. I was like, California? Hell no, man, that's far. That's a place people visit where I'm from. You know what I'm saying? If they're lucky enough, go to California, the place of Hollywood and celebrities and sunshine and beaches. It's whoa, that's so far away. Nah. But we start, she put the bug in our ear. And we start thinking about it, doing research, and it's well, shit. They did give birth to the Panthers out there, and we started seeing other things that were going on in the community, different events, different organizations. It was wow, this seems like a good place to maybe raise our family, because we did want to have children at some point, and we wanted to be in community and work towards change. So we decided to visit one of the friends that were living out here at the time, and fell in love. Just fell in love with the place. Wow, the weather is wonderful, and the people were great. And it was so diverse, and it was different. It was just very different than the Midwest, and the East Coast. You felt the progressiveness, you felt the radical history, you felt that people were on a different vibe, and trying to do things a little different. So that was very attractive to us, and we drove across the country, moved here, didn't have jobs, had a little money saved, and it was we know we can make it, We Midwesterners, you know what I'm saying? We work hard and we don't have a lot. So we knew that as long as we could get out here and get a place to live, then we could get jobs and we can make it happen. Just me and her. We ain't had no kid yet or nothing like that. So
I hear that. So I'm certainly glad you're making it work. So I'm curious, what are some lessons, especially because you've lived in a bunch of different places and had experiences across the country? Yep. Okay.
Tell him to come in here. He can watch his tablet now. That's enough. Yende, I got him. Come in here, babe. No, just come in here. Watch your tablet while we finish the interview, son. Thanks. Let me know if you have any trouble. It should be cool. You can sit right up there. You see it over here? Yeah, I see it. All right. Cool. And so you were saying?
I was saying you've had these experiences throughout the country, living in the Midwest, growing up there, moving to the East Coast, and then finally moving to the West Coast. And you've got to see society in a bunch of different ways. And I'm curious, what are some lessons you've learned about Black society as you've grown and been in all these different areas?
You know, I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is weird to say, but we're human beings, period. Like, Blackness is a part of us, but it's not the defining feature of us. Like this idea that I had growing up around what Black people do, what they don't do, who we are, who we aren't, it's totally been blown out for me. Like, we are everything. We do everything. We live everywhere. We have all these experiences that you can't just put into a box because we're humans, right? Like, we have every experience that humans can have. There's nothing off limits to Black people. And so for me, that's one of the biggest lessons I learned, the diversity of who we are as a people. Definitely, I know our similarities and our cultural connections, but I got that growing up. I felt that growing up. What I didn't feel growing up was the differences, you know. They were there, clearly. They were there. Like, if I just tapped into them, like in my own family, it's very diverse. You know, we have lots of different people who have lots of different interests and passions and ideas and experiences. But going around to these different places and interacting with different community really let me see, like, nah, Black people have experiences in all things human. So that's one of the big things I feel like I learned.
Oh, it's interesting. And just having these experiences, what do you feel like are, on the flip side, what are some of the most harmful or biggest issues that are within our communities?
I mean, you know, the legacy of enslavement, you know, like the ongoing effects that we still feel today, definitely right up there for me. You know, I would call that out along with the myth of white supremacy, because on the on the other side of the coin to the myth of white supremacy is the myth of Black inferiority, right? And that is eating us alive in our community, right? Like, just even philosophically, right? Like, we're not able to, as a community, break from ideas that are generated by Europeans, that were generated for Europeans, you know? And these thought patterns and these ideas are very much embedded in American society, in our education, in every institution in this country. So this is very problematic because it makes it hard for us to see who we are and what really matters to us philosophically and what are our systems and our modes of thinking. So I think for me, that's one of the biggest challenges. And to get more material and concrete, I also believe that capitalism is one of the biggest challenges to our people. Specifically because that's a system designed based on extraction and exploitation. Yeah. And us, the land and the indigenous people of America, or the so-called Americas, are the test case. You know, we're what this system is built on. And so for me, as we're trying to seek liberation and put ourselves in a better economic situation, if we're not grappling with capitalism, then we're just, to me, reduplicating the same system, just taking advantage of each other instead. And then I will also say what I would call the ecological crisis, or what some people might say climate change, is a very big issue for Black people. Whether it's explicitly known or said, in my opinion, this is something that is detrimental to us. And I think there's been a lot of examples of it. To me, Hurricane Katrina remains the most stark example to me, for our people to understand, like, this climate change issue, this ecological crisis, is gonna hit us first and worst. like most, if not all things in America. So for me, that's what I feel like some of our biggest challenges.
No, I mean, you touched on a lot of interesting points, and especially when you mentioned capitalism, just one of the tenets around that involves there being a hierarchy in regards to, who gets the most resources, who has them available, who's able to manufacture or, extract. And that, that always means that someone has to be on the bottom for that. And when you tie that in with all the racial aspects and history that's been in the U.S., it's almost always going to have that impact, as you say, first and worse with black folks, as we've been seeing. So around that, what would you say are maybe some ways you think these issues can be fixed?
Through decades, maybe even centuries of intergenerational organizing. I do believe that part of our challenge in organizing and movement building is to get back to an intergenerational model of organizing. I grew up and started my organizing on college campuses when I was like 18, and I'm almost 39 now. And in that time, I really do feel that I've seen organizing become this thing about working with the people who get it instead of working with the people who experience the problems. And there's this disconnect that I feel like we believe we can read books and we can read theories, and if we know these theories, then that makes us better organizers, or that makes us more radical. And I just don't believe that. I don't believe that we need to be organizing with just the folks who get it. Oh, you understand prison industrial complex, so let's make up a program, let's organize. No, we all have to understand that we have lived experiences that shape our wisdom about how to make change. And I do think that there's a disconnect between our generations. Like, we have segregation in our movement work. Like, you have older people who do these kind of things, you have younger people who do these kind of things. But what we need is a movement that is family-based and intergenerational, that we can pass on the victories from the older generation to the younger generation to the next generation on purpose, not by accident. So that's part of why I really like the work that we're doing at the Brotherhood of Elders Network. I've never been in an organizing space with elders until I came to the Brotherhood of Elders Network. Sitting down, talking with older people who were in the Black Power movement, who were in the Civil Rights movement, and now we're here in our new movement, and we are learning from them, they're learning from us, and then we're pulling in younger brothers too, to help give them the wisdom that we have for their next movement. And I think that just makes everything stronger.
Yeah, no, that my next question was going to speak about how the Brotherhood of Elders Network has impacted your life. And it sounds like one of the things you just mentioned, getting the opportunity to work with older generations on, the same issues as you threading that needle, if you will.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. I'll say about that in a second. I also want to say this other piece about intergenerational organizing. That inherently makes it to me, more sustainable. And I'll say this, like, part of why I feel this way is based on work that I've done outside the U.S. So traveling to other places like Ghana, traveling to places like Cusco, Peru, and seeing how families are organized in terms of movement building and struggle. One thing that stuck out to me in these places that I don't see here a lot, and that I would like to see more, intergenerational recreation and entertainment. I remember when, in both places, in Ghana, in Peru, when I was there, I would see people party and have fun at night, and it was not segregated by age. You had elders right here in the plaza drinking, playing games, listening to music. Young kids would come around and be with them. Older people dancing with younger people. The younger people might have a club space over here, but it's all here. The party involves all of the generations. I'm sure there are spaces for, young people or older people to be, but that's not the exclusive space. It's like the party is happening here and we're all invited. and it gives a certain level of safety, I feel, to the whole experience. And I would like to see more of that here when it comes to how we organize our movements and our meetings and things like this. Like, it should be events that are not just about how do we get the young people, how do we bring the whole community together and make it a place that we can all enjoy together. So, so I just want to say that piece about intergenerational organizing. And in terms of the Brotherhood Beyond, its impact on my ideas around organizing, concretely, the group has supported me through so many different personal challenges and professional. I found myself in a legal battle with a former employer, and I had no idea what to do. I had been in the Bay Area for like a couple years at that point. And this was the biggest fight of my life. I basically had an employer who was doing illegal activity, basically withholding people's paychecks. And the staff members were coming to me and saying like, hey man, what's going on? And this is not right. I was like the number 2 in charge. And so I remember getting into this conversation with her, my boss. And she basically told me if I didn't like what she's doing, I could just leave. And I was just like, okay. I mean, I can. I have a master's degree. Like, I don't really have to be here. You know what I'm saying? I have options. But the coworkers, they didn't have those same kind of options. So I kind of stayed and I helped organize and fight that. But I did that based off of advice that I got from brothers in the network, specifically Baba Greg. I went over to his house one day and I was just like, hey man, I don't know what to do. Like, this lady is doing these things. She said, I don't like it. I could just leave, but I don't feel like that's right. I feel like, I need to help. And he was like, you should fight. You should fight. And I was like, really? I was like, I could just walk away. And he was like, no, you could fight and you should. And I was like, okay. So I did. I fought back. We organized, brought a lawsuit to her. We settled ultimately out of court, and she had to pay all the employees back wages plus some, and she had to pay me too for a wrongful termination. And so without this network, I don't know where I go with that.
Wow.
And then on a personal note, this organization supported me through the passing of my sister. And they've supported many brothers like this. Like when we have issues, a lot of different, whatever the issue may be, if we bring it to the group, we can problem solve it together. So just concretely, it was just a beautiful experience. It was, to me, a divine experience. My sister battled alcoholism for a lot of her life. And in 2017, it ultimately took her life. But I found out a little earlier in the year that she had cirrhosis of the liver. And when I found this out, I actually happened to be at a retreat with the Brotherhood. We were doing a retreat with the National Compadres Network, and it was all about healing and bringing our emotions as men out. We did they call it a retiro. We would sit for a couple of days and just have circles. Circulo is what they call it, circulo. And we would share in the circle, whatever we needed to share based on the prompts that were provided. And then we would have a sweat, a temescal, a sweat lodge, where we would construct a half dome and built out of sticks and things and twine, and we would cover it with blankets, and in the inside there would be a fire, not a fire, but like hot stones, and we pour water, and it would create like a sauna environment where you sweat. We would sing songs and pray and do all of these things. And I was there when I found out this news about my sister, and it just was the place that I needed to be at that moment. I was not at home. I wasn't with my wife or with my son. Being there I would have had to cut off some of my emotions just to stay present for my family, or at least I would have thought I had to. But being at this retreat at that specific time, it really was the place that I needed to be. And I could let go, and I could release, I could cry, I could yell, I could feel all the feelings that I had. And all the brothers loved me up afterwards. Because I told them, I got the call and I told them, this would just happen to me. They loved me up and gave me good energy. And then ultimately, months later, she actually ended up passing. And the brothers came through and also provided me some travel funds to go back home. Because I had to take my son and my wife, and It's expensive, and I was helping with the funeral, so
Yeah.
you know, just having a community to just, you know, you just never know when things are gonna happen, and you know when they do, it's just really nice to just already have a place to be.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, that's very powerful. And as you said, the fact that when you did receive that news, you were in a place where healing was the main focus. I mean, that I'm sure that did, as you said, that did wonders, and you know, just helping to really foster that bond between all the brothers and babas that were there to, you know, to really support in a personal way, you know, an emotional way, which is, I'd say, arguably just as important as helping from a legal side or financial and all that. It really makes a difference.
Absolutely.
I'm curious, what would be some advice you would give to your younger self?
Yeah, you know, I saw that question earlier, and I was like, how am I gonna answer this? One thing I'm gonna keep it real on is, oh, my son's not listening too closely. I would have definitely told myself, it's okay to wait to have sex. It's okay. I know it was just so much pressure growing up, internally and externally. You know, like I had certain, you know, things going on physically, right? Like, whoa, these feelings of attraction and stuff. Wow, this is big, you know? But it just, to me, was just too much of my focus. You know what I mean? Like, it was too much a part of what I thought was supposed to be my identity as a black man. And I wish that I could have understood that that's not true. You know, like how many women you're with, or how much the women like you. Like, this is not make or break who you are as a person. And for me, growing up as a young man, I thought that, you know, and a lot of my friends did. Like, if we didn't have women, or if the ladies didn't like us, then we were less than. And I just wish I could have told myself, but no, you're great, you're good, because of the way you treat people, you know, because of the friend you are, you know what I mean, because of how you help people, not because this girl likes you, or not because you can get the attention and get a number or anything like that. I wish I could have, you know, told myself to don't focus so much on that. Focus on developing these skills and talents that you already have. Like, lean into that. Yeah, and I also would have given myself better financial management, you know? Like, yeah, I would say, hey, you know, every dollar you get, put one away, you know?
Yeah.
But for me, every dollar I got was spend it. Because you don't know if you're going to have it no more.
Right.
You know, I grew up in this interesting way, like, hey, you never know how long this money going to be around, so you got it today, you might as well spend it. And I thankfully, took me a long time, but I feel like I'm on the other side of that now. But as a young person, I would have probably given myself those two pieces.
I hear that. What would be some wisdom that you'd share with a younger generation?
You know, I would tell the younger generation that they have everything they need. And to believe deeply in the power of themselves to make change, and the power of their ancestry. I would tell them that it is that some of the most important work they can do is to uncover their connection to their ancestors, and to study the way our ancestors developed their thoughts and ideas, and to know what those thoughts and ideas were. And I feel like if we have that, then all that natural talent and that natural ability for young folks will be enhanced, and I think that will help them reach their full potential.
Wise words. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we wrap up?
Let's see. In terms of future things, I think we all, as black people around the world, I feel like we should get ready to have resources and to manage those resources. We've been in a place of scarcity for a very long time, and we still will be, but I do believe that we're moving into a different era where we're gonna have control of resources. And how we use those resources is gonna determine the course of humanity. And I really mean that. Not just black people, we're the only group of people that can speak to the human experience from start to finish. All people on this planet come from people who were in Africa. The human experience is an African experience fundamentally, more so than it's been anybody else's experience. Human beings have lived on the continent of Africa for at least 500,000 years. There's no other place in the world like that. And so the work that we do is really fundamentally about our species. And what we choose to do with the resources that we're going to get and going to take is going to determine the future of our species.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. Really appreciate all your words of wisdom, and yeah, this has been excellent, man. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's been great talking to you.